this money from the NRA, so I don't care about guns. No, guns are the opposite of gay marriage. They harm people.
Hi, everyone. This is Raquel.
Hi, and this is Jennifer.
Welcome to Madness Cafe.
This is a feminist podcast where we talk about women's issues, politics, and health and wellness.
And where those issues intersect. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Madness Cafe. Today, Jennifer and I are talking to Anne Riley,
I must do
the
this
author.
too.
Yes, the author of this lovely book that we are holding up called The Human Idea. Let me read Anne's bio because it's pretty awesome. For many years, Anne balanced family life with a career in various industries, including technology, teaching, and finance, before retiring in 2011. Influenced by Michael Rothschild's Bionomics, Riley developed a theory known as the Ideasphere, exploring the parallels between human and ecological systems. Her theory is articulated in this book right here, The Human Idea, Earth's Newest Ecosystem. And Riley's work is not just a reflection on our past, but a call to action for our future. As we stand at a pivotal moment in history, grappling with existential threats like climate change and social inequality, the human idea offers a roadmap for applying the lessons of nature to build a better world. And we are so excited to talk to you about this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, and I am
Madness
so
Cafe.
excited to be here. Thank you so much.
So I'd like to start today asking you a little bit about you and why it was so important for you to share your theory, known as the Ideasphere, in your novel, Dina, and now this book, The Human Idea.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I'm atypical, I suppose, in every way, in that I am I'm an accountant and I have an MBA, and there is no reason in the world why I should write a book about DNA and humans and government, and economics makes more sense. But the thing is, when I was a kid, I grew up, I was born Catholic, and I grew up and I went to Catholic school. But I was about fourth grade, and I remember we learned about evolution. And I was like, these things do not seem to fly together. There's this clear.
This isn't what they're telling us in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, exactly. But I give them credit for telling it because it changed my perspective. It was like, okay, so what I hear is that you can see the connection between yourself and every other animal, right? We have two arms, two legs, two eyes, two ears. We have way more similarities than differences. And yet at the same time, I'm learning that, God created the earth in 7 days and blah, 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 blah. And I was like, you know what? I didn't get it at the time. I just knew it didn't connect. I spent sort of under the radar the next 50 years, under the radar, processing this, thinking about it. And every time I got to a new idea, I would put it in a bucket. It was either this one's in or this one's out. I'd read books like Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance, and it was like, there's elements of truth in there that I need to remember and keep. And then there were things like, economics and supply equals demand and maximize profit. I'm like, yeah, I get it, but it doesn't make sense about how people actually behave. But it's easy math, right? It's really easy to see those curves meet and go, there's your price, and I was like, so I just went through this process, and we got to, I read Michael Rothschild's book in the early 90s, and he was brilliant. If you want to read a book about how he wanted to do, he married economic systems to natural systems. And he was the first one. And I was like, I gave him credit, one, because it was probably the first time since social Darwinism that anybody even attempted to link nature to humans, because it was such a disaster the first time it happened. But I was like, well, the obvious question to me was, well, if economic systems mirror nature, humans must mirror nature. Of course. And so I was like, it's not going to be long before somebody writes this book. And I was waiting and waiting and waiting, and nobody wrote the book. And in fact, the term Bionomics got sort of taken to mean the economic costs of climate change, that's what Bionomics meant. And I was like, but no, you're missing the point. So I wasn't quite sure. I knew how it all worked, how the non-humans all worked, and I got it. It made all kinds of sense. But then I'd get to humans every time, and I'd be like, Well, we do things differently. We think we do things differently. It doesn't fit. How does this fit? And then I worked on Lauren Underwood's campaign. I don't know if you know who Lauren Underwood is. She's the representative in Illinois 14. She was the youngest Black woman ever elected to Congress. And
Right.
so
Okay. I
I
do know
worked
her
on
name
her
now.
campaign where she flipped a red seat that had been red for like 10 years, and she just won in
Yeah.
2018. And it was like, and she's been our representative ever since. I'm hoping she'll now run for Senate for Dick Durbin's seat, but I'm still waiting for her to announce. But it was like, it was 2018. Of course, we're in the midst of the first Trump era. And all of a sudden, people started coming in. We had Jeff Merkley from Oregon. We had Patrick Duvall from Massachusetts. We had Joe Kennedy. I mean, all these people. Joe Biden came in and gave a huge talk. I was like, why are all these people coming to help Lauren? And I was like, I mean, I know she's wonderful and she is, but it was then I realized how important government was in society. Government is the coordinating system
Hmm.
of society, just like our brain is the coordinating system of our body. And whoever in humans, you choose who gets to coordinate. In bodies, the brain gets to be the brain. It doesn't, it's made of neurons, just like, government is made of people, but they don't get to choose. You're a neuron, you're born a neuron, you stay a neuron all your life. You don't get to like run for brain office, you don't get to do that in life, but we do. And so this was the people who control the government, control the coordination function, which means they control how we live together. And I
Hmm.
was like, this is very important. And obviously, we were seeing Trump controlling how we live together in a different way than Democrats. And it was like, it just clicked. The whole thing clicked. And I could see finally the parallels between the two systems. And then it was a matter of working it out. It took me 5 years to write the first book, Dina, and that one was it has a story along with a theory, and I loved writing it because it had a Socratic dialogue where I was working out the theory as I was writing the book. I was like,
Cool.
nope, and the theory had to win. So even though I had certain biases about
Hmm.
how things I thought should be, it was like, theory says, you can't do that. So like I make an argument about public education, and
Mhm.
that we would be better off having private education with a very tight government control over the content, because when you compete and you develop new ways to do things at a lot faster rate. When
Hmm.
you're a government organization and you don't have to compete, you get sluggish and you don't have that push behind you. And so I was like, no, I've always been a public school advocate, but it was like, no, it doesn't mean that you don't have the public good involved. It's just a different way of doing it. And so it was really an awakening for me, but it was also every time I did this, the theory held up more and more, and to where it was like, I feel like I must tell the world this.
Do you have a way, maybe you don't because you wrote two books about it, but do you have a way to describe the theory quickly to someone?
Yes, the theory is that for human societies to work successfully, society must promote maximum choice for people, but always minimize the harm for people. Those are the only two rules. And we have those two rules because we live in two systems. On the natural ecosystem side, so the equivalent, of course, is your body, right? Your body is made of 35 trillion cells, and each of those cells works together to keep your body alive and keep each cell alive as best they can. Well, in our society, it's the exact same structure. People are like the cells. We all live together in a society. Society is the body, right? And we all live together in a society. And the rules for those cells are, hey, cells, do your job, right? Heart cells pump blood, kidney cells excrete waste, right? Everybody does their thing. But and the only rule is you can't harm another cell. If you
Yeah.
harm another cell, the brain's going to send out its police and say, we'll help you not do this anymore. And if not, they will send you out. They will kill you, or they will make you kill yourself. That's how
Yeah.
it works. Now, that's a little drastic, but the same idea rules. People, again, because we're different and we have the ability to think and choose, which is our superpower, that in order to make life, there's no inherent meaning in life. The meaning comes from us developing our values and living the things that are important to us, which means maximizing our choices. So to be a human in both of these systems, the natural system, you can't do any harm. The idea system, you maximize your choices. And any organization who's going to work on coexistence has to follow those two rules. And guess what? We don't do it.
Yeah.
The world doesn't do it.
Okay, I have to say a couple of things. I want to read this quote that you have in the book, but first I want to say this is so key, and this is literally just the embodiment of something that I just think more people should do, is not only do you read, but you think critically about what you read, and you
Right.
make connections between
Mhm.
ideas that aren't just spoon-fed to you, and
Right.
I have to say, I am so in awe of you doing that. I mean, literally the entire book, I was like, "Man, she's brilliant," literally.
I'm
So,
so happy to hear you say that because I do get people who go, "Oh, I never thought of that." And I hadn't either because
I think it's awesome.
I spent so many years listening to whatever people say and I kept going like, "No. No." And every once in a while I go, "Yep. Yep." And then pretty soon it was, "Oh, I the book didn't get written that I wanted to write. It's time for me to write the book that I need to write."
Yeah,
And that is what has driven me, I think. And I'm not crazy driven. I'm just like, no, this is important about getting this message out to the world. And it's so basic and so easy. And it's not like it's new. Jesus said, the golden rule, do unto
mm,
others as you would have done unto you, which is basically let them do what they want, but don't hurt them. Right. It's
right,
the same thing in different words. MLK
right,
Jr. said, maximize, go for your rights, fight for your civil rights, but don't do it violently. You're
right.
doing the exact same thing. It's
Yeah,
just that it turns out that nature's been doing this for 4 billion years, and we hadn't figured it out because we started with a brain that worked before we had facts, before science worked,
yeah,
And so we developed ideas like philosophy and religions that answered all the questions. And when we finally got the answers factually, which was when we learned about DNA and we learned about all these things, we're too embedded in our old beliefs to even see these new ideas, and they're right in front of us.
yeah, yeah, and you actually say, I mean, you say it in many places throughout the book, but specifically on page 247, you write, "People ought to be free to create any idea and convert it to any action they want, as long as their actions do not harm other people or the society as a whole."
Right?
Thank you so much
That's it.
for
That's the one sentence.
writing this book
Thank you.
and literally putting into actual form so that
Mhm.
this will live beyond you, as you
Right.
say. This is
Right.
how the ideas continue to exist
Right. Right.
by reading and thinking critically about what you read and then putting those thoughts on paper.
Right.
So
Right.
I just, yeah,
Thank you.
Well, you said that we're not doing it. We're not this is the formula for coexistence and we're not doing it. You said today in the United States we are undergoing an intense tussle over what the goals and rules of the country should be.
Right.
Can
Right.
you
mhm.
elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, well, first of all, I want a more basic question is I started a new YouTube channel called Conventional Wisdom Sucks, which is brand new. And I just did it because I wanted to address some of these ideas. And I started doing one about the human ideasphere. And I started at the beginning and I was like, no, 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 I just want to talk about people and life and how it works. But so what I did was I asked Chat GPT, I said, what's the purpose of government? And they said, to maintain order. And I said, well, that's a verb and government is a noun. So sorry, But then I asked Miriam, the Merriam dictionary, and it said it's the governing body. And I said, you cannot use the word in your definition, right? Classic. So finally somebody said, I think it said it's a mechanism to keep society safe. And I'm like, well, who's society? It's people.
Mhm.
So what I realized is that we don't actually know how to define government. And a
Yes.
Mhm.
basic problem we're here
Yep.
having. And so if you want to define government, it's all based on, if you go back, it's based on philosophies and it's based on religions. But
Mhm.
who's here first? Who knows stuff? Nature. And if you look at your body, they know how to do government. The brain is the best government ever. It keeps all the cells alive and it keeps the society alive, right? That's what it does. And it does it through very clear mechanisms. And, I'll just name a few so you can get an idea about what I'm talking about. One is the brain is protected. It's got, stuff around it so that it can do its job without any hassle from any other cells, right? Sometimes it has to send other cells to kill a cell. Sometimes it has to take resources from all the other cells to make it, if a body's starving, to make sure the body lives. Sometimes it has to send help for a cell that's in, you cut your finger, it doesn't heal by itself. The brain has sent a bunch of cells down there to help your finger heal by giving more, I don't know, more skin cells and all that other stuff. I don't know the details any further than that. So I'm not a doctor. So that's one thing, is it has to do hard things so it is kept protected from all the other cells. Well, we don't do that in our government. We let
Well,
money
we certainly have
by
not let
private
our
industries infect our government and our candidates. That is totally wrong. I mean, totally a guarantee that you will not survive. Because if you did that, your system is not going to work well, because it works well when it's for the good of the whole, right? That's always what you come back to. What is good for all the cells and the body itself?
You mean not what's good for Elon Musk? That doesn't come
Exactly.
first?
That's exactly the point. All the billionaires are now get to write the laws or get to do, do the things that benefit them. And we all, because the laws affect all of us, get to ride along, for the ride and have to take the consequences of decisions that are made by the few. And
Yep.
all of us have to do it. So that's number one.
Yep.
The other thing is every cell in your body is critical to the survival of the body. So they all have to be nourished, right? So how does it work? We eat stuff, right? And it goes down to our stomach and it gets ground up and then it gets sent out through the circulation system to all the other cells. So what we have on the stomach is 100% taxation, big socialist, brain who decided on this system, right? The stomach eats its stuff and everything except just what it needs goes out, right? And every other organ and every other cell is a nanny state parasite who gets fed because they don't eat, but they get fed just like everybody else. But guess what? They do a job for the body. They
Yeah.
pump blood or they excrete waste or they let you type on your keyboard. There's all kinds of things. So taxation is equivalent in human systems to nourishment in natural systems. But our taxation systems are all wrong. We have an income tax, which says that everybody gets to, run their business or get their wages, and maybe they get a few expenses to deduct, and then you have to pay some percentage to the government. That's like saying the heart cells say, well, we're going to take all these resources, we're going to eat all this stuff, and then we're going to try and do all this other stuff and not give anything to that stupid brain so it can work. That's not how it works. In a body, the brain gets fed first, and it never takes more than it needs because it needs to keep everything running, but it never takes more than it needs. And it takes a lot. It takes 20% of all of our energy, and it's only 3% of our mass. So coordinating is a hard, energy intensive business. Government is a hard and energy intensive business, right? It is.
Yeah.
It's difficult. The other thing that I think that's just very important is that every cell discloses up to the brain what its status is. The brain
Mm.
wouldn't know what's happening in the body unless the body tells it what to do. Well, the only thing we do like that in our government is the census. Every 10 years, we send up a thing that says, my name is this, and I live here, and I have this many kids, right? And that's only so that we can apportion federal funds to each area. But information is so cheap these days, and we have lots of problems. We could use that kind of information for things that are really critical, like how about if we study guns and what's happening with guns? How about if we study pollution? How about if we study police violence? How
Mhm.
about if we study homelessness? We can gather this information and then learn how to do things, use government funds to address some of these problems. And that's what a body would do. And I'm just saying, this is a good model for how we as a society could work. And I don't think we even understand that we should look at it this way. I think we're at
Mhm.
this basic first step after, 10,000 years of humanity where we've communicated with each other. We have yet to figure out how fundamentally we should think about living together.
I love everything you just said and everything that you say in the book, and I'm never gonna get to all my questions.
Okay.
But one one thing is how I literally underline just about
I
every,
love it. I'm
sentence
so
in the
glad
book.
you did. Because I packed
But
it full of stuff.
yeah, you did, which is great. But I mean, it's very accessible though. I mean, it's good stuff. As I was reading this, I kept thinking, I wonder what reactions you're getting from people about this. Because when you think about it, this is this is pretty groundbreaking stuff. This is some could even say subversive. I mean, you're
Yes.
presenting a new way
Hmm.
that our government and our society could work
Hmm.
to help make sure that our society that we as living human as human beings, as humanity, that we can continue to exist on this planet.
Right.
I'm just wondering what kind of reactions are you getting from people about the information
Yeah.
and the way that you're presenting the information in this book?
I wish I could say I was getting a lot of reactions, but it's really hard to get this idea out there. I
Damn
mean,
it.
it really is. And I'm trying very hard. And part of it is doing podcasts, and part of it is trying to explain what I'm doing. But it's really hard for people. I couldn't even get it published by a traditional publisher. Here's what they say. They say, well, especially Dina, it was like fiction or nonfiction. Yes.
Yeah.
And and it's like, well, what is your book about? Well, it's about the human condition. Oh, philosophy. We don't sell philosophy. Sorry. I'm like, well, it's got economic. It's like, well, is it science? Yes, and economics and sociology and government. The problem is it doesn't fit anywhere. When you're
Okay.
dealing with the human condition, nature is holistic, right? It
Yeah.
crosses everything. It doesn't care whether it's the it's the heart or the kidney. It's a system that all
Yeah.
works together, and it it cooperates as one thing. And it's just really hard to get people who are interested in money and profit. They are just like, we don't know what to do with you. And the
Mhm.
easiest thing is to say no. Though I will
Mhm.
tell you a funny story though, is I did write up a little thing for Harvard Business School. I wanted to enter, put a little article in. And I will tell you, I never got an answer so fast that was a no. It was like, I think because I
Oh.
said profit maximization is one of the great dangers of our society. And they're like, what? You can't do that. So I think what happens is when you murder all the sacred cows, nobody wants to, but the fact is that I don't care. Nature works this way. I'm just telling you how nature works. I'm
Yeah.
not saying anything that nature isn't telling you that you just don't want to see. I just have to keep working on it. My dad was a nuclear scientist, and he used to say that for a nuclear reaction to occur, you have to have critical mass. You have to have enough nuclear
Mhm.
material so that the interactions, transactions will occur, right?
Mhm.
And then it's dangerous. Well, I need enough critical mass in
Yeah.
order for people to go, oh, it's worth reading this book. I need enough people to say, oh, this is one of the better books I've ever read. And
Yeah.
I've had people say, this is the best book I've ever read. I've had another guy say, when are you running for office? And I am toying with the idea of actually running for office,
Yes.
because it's important to tell people this idea, and
Yeah.
that they have an idea that it is fair for them to understand that they can ask the question about what is the nature of a government? What
Yeah.
should you expect of a government? And if you say to people, listen, your government should do these two things. They should allow you to do what you want, but never allow you to hurt anybody else. If you tell them
Mhm.
that, they'll be like, okay, oh, that makes sense. And I'm like, vote for me. Yeah. But it's not been made so clear, and yet nature
Mhm.
makes it so utterly clear. Uh,
Yeah.
Especially if you read the book, I tried to lay it out sort of step by step by step to show.
Which you did. You did a
Mhm.
really good job of that.
Yeah.
But I have to disagree with both of you a little bit.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't think this is subversive. I think the way that you laid it out, yes, is unique and uncommon, but I don't think this thought process is so. I think that people know that having profits being your bottom line is dangerous. I
Hmm.
Yeah.
think they know it's killing our planet.
Hmm.
They don't want to admit it because the people who know this are making their profit. They
Yeah.
Hmm.
don't want to give up the comfortability of their own life. In fact, most of us don't want to give up the comfortability of our own life. If
Right.
we
Hmm.
were to equalize, if we were to follow the blueprint that you set up
Hmm.
for us in this book,
Hmm.
we would have to stop consuming so damn much.
Well, again, I think what I would say is you wouldn't have to stop consuming, but what you would have to do is ask the question, is the production of this material harmful to people? So if you are going to create plastic that can't be absorbed, then
Yeah.
this is where the government would go in and say, look, we're going to give you a couple years, but you need to figure out how to make plastics biodegradable. That's
Right.
your job. If you can't do that, you've created a harm for our earth that cannot be recovered from. So we're not going to let you do that. So the thing is that we're trying to make it so that people can maximize their choices. If you want to consume, you get to consume, but you can't consume things that are harmful. That's where government is hard. Government has to decide where is the harm and what are you going to do about it. And to your point, before you ask the question, I want to say, Jennifer, to your point about we'd have to give up stuff, we have to start from where we are and move towards this new future. But if you don't have the idea in mind about what the goal is, you can never get there. You will
Mhm.
never get there. You will go off on these tangents and you will never. So if the idea is no matter what you do is to say, if I were the president of the world, I'd be like, look, you guys have to figure out. I mean, we know that burning oil and gas is polluting the environment, and we're going to snuff ourselves out first.
Mhm.
Yeah,
You know,
it's going to
so
kill
what I
us.
want you to do is figure out, research other ways to either create oil and gas that don't pollute or create other alternative solutions. It's not going to be about profit only. It's going to be about these rules that come in. And
Yes.
I think that's where you have to keep moving, and you always have to say, look, oil and gas
But
harm people.
but
We
again,
have
I
to change our way.
but again, I think everybody knows that we must do this, and
But
yet
they
we're
don't
not.
But
but
here's the
they
here.
don't know it in this clear, precise harm versus choice. They don't see it that way. And they see it as profits. And we're like, wait. Harm. Harm is the key, not
And
profit.
but I also think that government, the brain, needs to incentivize
Hmm.
these companies to
Hmm.
find a way to maximize profit without doing harm. And I think
Right.
that's part of where this comes in, is that government has got to find a way to incentivize companies to figure out how to do that. But they have to do that, I think, in like, okay, do whatever is necessary so that you have people who think creatively enough to find a new way to do this. But
Hmm.
oh, guess what? They have to have the education
Hmm.
to figure out whatever that linchpin is to make
Hmm.
that change.
Right.
So government has to be incentivized, which you would think, oh, the planet's about to die. You would think
Yeah.
that would be enough incentive, but it isn't. But I think that's where the connection has to come in and go, yeah, you can still make your money. That's cool. But guess what? Make your money in a different way. And where if
Right.
you come up with a way
Right.
to continue to make money, but do it in a way that's not harmful, oh,
That's
look,
it.
here's
That's
some
it.
more money. That's the way
Right.
it's got to be couched, I think.
Right. I agree. Wait, the maximizing profit can still be a goal, but it's balanced with an equally important goal, which is no harm.
Right.
Those things must be balanced. If you don't balance them, then maximizing profit will always win and harm people will be harmed. But you have to be able to say to people, look, I don't mind you maximizing profit, but you're doing harm. And we have
Yeah.
the data that shows you're doing harm. You need to stop the harm. Now,
Yeah.
sometimes it can be like your product blows up and kills people. You have to fix that. Or it could be you're polluting the air and the water. That's another way to fix it. Or it could be that you're paying your people $7 an hour and they can't live on the wage. Sorry,
Hmm.
not going to work.
You
That's
can't
where
be in business if you can't pay your people.
Hmm. Yeah,
right.
it's a branding issue.
Right.
This has to be reframed so that it's, yeah, you can still make your money, but you have to make your money in a way that doesn't hurt people. And
Right.
instead of calling things regulations,
Mhm.
and people being like, I hate regulations. Why are you telling people what to do? Just go, no. We're empowering you to figure out a better way to do this.
Right.
The planet is
Because
still going to
because you can't
survive,
harm
but you
people.
still make more money.
Right.
That's,
Right.
Okay.
we just have to
And
say
that's
it a
what
different
the
way.
point Yvonne was making was
Mhm.
that she was reframing her
Yep.
work and saying you will make more money if you include all these other people with all their other ideas. And I was like,
Mhm.
yes. And one of the things that I'm trying to do, and I really envision me doing is getting this fundamental idea out there. And then you get people like Yvonne and a million other people who are experts in their field to use this as another way to encourage people to say, look, you can't harm people with your products. You just can't do it,
Yeah.
or you can't harm people by discriminating against them. These are other ways. So I want that I see this book as a fundamental level that people can then they can take off. I'm not an expert in all these fields. I can see like the government thing a little bit more because and I can see the profit thing because I've been in accounting and business all my life. But there are people who are experts in these fields. If you have this idea, they're great at marketing. And if you read the book and I talk about the cigarettes, I'm like, those assholes, you know. It's like, no, but can you make a product that doesn't harm people? Can
Yeah.
you? Then maybe we should do that, and the government is the big enough unit to provide like you say, the incentives or the carrot or the stick
Mhm.
to get them to do these things. Because if you just say, please, they aren't going to do it. You
Yeah.
have to have a goal as strong as profit to match it in order to make them change their ways.
Okay. On page 224, one of my favorite parts of the book, you really go out of your way to talk about what is harm and what is not harmful. This is one of
Oh,
my favorite
yes.
parts because you talk about gay marriage, you talk about voting, you talk about
Right.
abortion,
Right.
transgender identity, contraception,
Right.
maximizing non-harmful rights. And I think that's a really important thing to bring up because when we're defining government, we also have to define harm.
Right.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's the job of government, is to figure out where harm is in such an interdependent society like we are. When you create a law, you better first figure out where the harm is or not, right? In order to make a law. The problem with something like the history with gay marriage is it's so silly, right? It's just silly because these people don't hurt anybody, right? There's two people. My little sister is gay and she's married to a lovely woman, and they have yet to hurt my marriage. They have yet to harm my marriage. You know,
Imagine that.
it's so cool. It's amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's silly, and but we grew up with these ideas that were couched in moral or church or religion that gay equals bad. And honestly, in college, I felt that way. And it was having a gay roommate who I treated badly for me to learn oh, I've got this all wrong. And I had to re re relearn on the fly that I was not treating people as people. I was
You
treating
evolved.
the label, and that's not how it works. And, so by the time my sister came out, I was like, well, when's the wedding? What? So you're no different. You're just my sister, So the problem is having an opinion, like not liking something doesn't rise to the level of harm. Harm is some physical or reputational or
Mhm.
financial damage being done to you. Like I said, gay marriage isn't. Now, the one that's a little trickier is abortion. You
It
know,
is tricky because people
because there
believe.
is, yeah, but here's the thing. When you are before 20 weeks and you're pregnant, that baby is entirely dependent on you. It cannot live on its own at
Mhm,
that time. And so the mom, as the carrier of the child, that baby is her.
mhm,
And so she has sole decision. That's
I
it.
agree.
That's it.
mhm.
And it makes sense because the baby isn't viable. Now, after 20 weeks, it starts to get a little hairy because the baby can survive. And so now future moms have that decision to make before 20 weeks because then it's their decision. After that, they move to a different place. Nobody says this is easy. Figuring out harm in a very interdependent society is hard. But that's what our legislators should be focused on. They should
It
be focused on, I got all this money from the NRA, so I don't care about guns. No, guns are the opposite of gay marriage. They harm people. They
mhm.
harm people. They can kill people, and you don't get to come back from it.
Let's go back to this abortion thing for a
Okay.
second.
Sure.
Because this I think is where it could get really tricky in government if this was
Mhm,
your role, do no
mhm.
harm.
Sure.
Because we could say this woman is pregnant after 20 weeks and it will cause harm to the baby if she aborts it,
Hmm.
but it could also cause harm to the baby if we force her to carry it
Mhm.
Right.
because the baby
Right.
could be
Well,
abandoned, not
right.
loved. It could be loved very much, but maybe she can't feed it.
And in those cases, like I said, this is where I make a big case about education from the very beginning.
Yes,
That
you do, and I appreciate that.
education is how we become members of society.
Yeah,
Education should not just be considered how we get a job when we're older, which is kind of where I think we're going with it.
right.
Education should be fully teaching people how to be good choosers, how
Mhm.
to not harm each other, how to figure out what these problems are early. And it's not a class like, oh, I'm going to take civics in 11th grade. Every single year that you're in school, you're taking some matter of how do I be a human in this world,
Well,
you
yeah,
know.
how do you think critically and how do you see the connections between ideas?
Yeah,
That's what nobody learns anymore.
And if we
right.
worked as a society where we actually took care of each other, then we could
Exactly.
help this young woman with the
Right.
birthing of her
Well, and
Yeah,
child
she would
not
be
just
with
the
the
connection of
educated.
ideas, but the connections of people.
Yes,
people.
and she would
Yes,
be educated and already know this the decisions that come up with this because this
right.
is something you're probably going to learn. I know in the state of Oregon, all the kids had to learn, they had to have a sex education
Sex
class.
ed, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. And of course, what happened in Oregon is the pregnancy rate went way down because
Right.
everybody was educated. And it was
Because you
like,
know
oh,
how you get
yeah,
pregnant.
Yeah,
exactly. And you know
yeah.
what's
And
going
then
to
you know how
happen?
not to get pregnant.
Yeah, I'll tell you one funny story, but I told my son he had a girlfriend and I knew they were kind of getting, and I said, "Oh, hey, honey, I just want to make sure that you guys are using protection." And he's like, "Mom." And I said, "Well, otherwise, do you have an extra $500,000 you're going to use to raise your child?" And he was like, and I said, "Well, that's your choice. Spend a
I
dollar
love it.
79 for the condoms or 500 grand for the child. You
And in fact, I'll give you a box for free.
Right, exactly. Here you go, kid. Love it.
So he was like, "Mom, shut up." But
Did you want to read a little bit from your book?
yeah, it's hard to read from this book because there's so much, but it all connects.
It's all
So,
good.
but I did pick out a part. So I went with the introduction on page
Okay.
11. I said, I end this book by connecting the way individual life forms ensure their survival to how humans can enhance their chance of survival. Cells have developed very specific structures and perform very specific actions to make sure they survive. Humans can learn by understanding these structures and actions and applying them to human life. Then translation, however, is not direct. It cannot possibly be. Humans' ideas work too differently. We must convert the natural world's automatic successful survival strategies so that they are compatible to humans and their ideas. I call this version of the human ecosystem the Idealsphere.
Love it.
Awesome. What are some of those strategies you were talking about?
Well, that's what we talked about. We talked about the protection. We talked about nourishment as taxation, and I go into kind of how nourishment should work, how taxation should work.
Mhm.
One thing is I think that everybody should have like an off the top low revenue tax, which means everybody, it's the price you pay to contribute to society, right? Everybody pays
Mhm.
1% of their wages or something. But the real big winners, they pay a very high income tax rate. And
Yeah.
I use the strategy of, I called the company Big Mamazon. I don't know how
Yeah.
you could make that comparison to any real company. I
What?
don't know what. There's no company called Big Mamazon, but 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 I took Amazon's actual numbers and compared how they would behave if they were taxed this way. And the point is, in nature, nothing accumulates resources. If they accumulate a lot of resources, they immediately have a new generation of children.
Mhm.
So if a company accumulate a lot of resources, the first thing they would do is make more products, right? But they don't
Mhm.
do that. They just keep the money.
No.
So the second thing that nature does is, if they even have excess resources there and they eat them, they're going to become slow and fat, and somebody's going to pick them off. And competition is going to keep the swift, capable ones alive. So our job is to not let anybody get fat, right? Our
Mhm.
job is to not let our companies get so fat that they become uncompetitive. And that's
Mhm.
what happens today. We have an oligarchy that's kind of developing. So that's one of them. And then I talk about the different roles. The neurons, the brain only enforces the rules, and
Mhm.
everybody else does the work. And which is why I'm like, government should not be educating children. Government should not be cleaning water, but they should be setting the rules so that they educate children to maximize their choice and minimize harm. That we have rules set so that water is clean so that people don't get sick. The government's job is to set those rules and enforce them, not to do them.
Mhm.
If you do them if you're a government, you stop competing, which means you stop getting sharp. Competition has a role. It just doesn't have the only role, right?
Mhm.
Mhm.
Collaboration is the opposite. There's two things that animals do. They either collaborate or they compete, and both of them do great things. Competition keeps everything sharp and creates diversity of ideas and diversity of products. Collaboration creates complexity, specialization. That's why you make spaceships,
Mhm.
because everybody gets together and makes the spaceship. So those two things work in tandem. They work in tandem in nature, and we should have them work in tandem, but we should know what we're doing. Nature knows what it's doing. We don't necessarily. We have these ideologies that says competition only, collaboration only. And it's like, duh, what are you trying to do here? If you're
Yeah.
trying to just have an ideology that says competition or collaboration, great, keep going. But if your job is to maximize choice and minimize harm, which type of competition do you want? Which type of collaboration do you want? These can work together, and we can have all kinds of solutions.
Mhm. But you also bring up, there's a third C that you bring up in the
Yes,
book,
yes,
coordination.
coordination. And coordination is the special collaborative form.
Mhm.
Coordination is above, or actually below, I would put it, is foundational, because
Mhm.
coordination allows collaboration to occur. If
Mhm.
you have, it doesn't matter, you have two people together, somebody has to figure out what to do if you're going to work
Mhm.
together.
Yeah.
Coordination is the natural thing that if you're going to bring people together, you will have coordination. You will. Parents in a family, your management in a company, the president of the book club. It doesn't matter what it is. There's the Pope and the Imam in churches. Every time people come together, they need to be coordinated or they will be anarchic. And
Yeah.
it's just, they'll end up being like one-celled creatures who just do their own thing, right?
Yeah.
Because that's all the coordination they can do. They don't have any coordination. They just run around and be themselves. But if you're going to start joining together, every animal that's joined together has had some sort of coordinating mechanism. And our government is a coordinating mechanism. Your parents in a family, every time people get together, coordination exists, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
What did you want to tell our audience that we didn't give you a chance to?
What I want to tell people is if you want to really understand the case I make, do get the book, because it's a full case. It's not partial, and or you can go on my YouTube channels and look, or you can go on my website. But mainly, I want you to understand that your life is in your hands. You are also the ruler of your own life, right? When you create your values, And then from your values, you create your actions. You are the coordinator of your life. And that idea is very empowering to me. It has, once I got this, it's like, oh, I got it. Life is, it's not that life doesn't me with challenges, but I know how to deal with them because I
Yep.
know how to look at where is the harm? Where are my choices? How do I navigate through this? It's very empowering. So what I want people to remember is that do what you want, but don't hurt anybody. That's it. Live your life. Do it.
Oh, and this book just spoke to my little nerd heart like
Oh,
you would not believe.
I'm
And
so happy.
everybody, please read this book. In fact, oh, you know what? If I had been taught this book in college, I would have loved the class where I read this book and talked about it.
Mhm.
High
This,
school.
or yeah, high school.
They
Yeah,
can
high
do
school.
this in high
Right.
school.
Absolutely. This
Well,
book should be taught to people.
I am
This would
toying with
make an
the idea of
amazing
creating an
class.
online course so
Oh
that
my
I
God.
I can put these ideas out there in the same way that I've done the book. And I really I will like I said, I got the audio book out now, so I'm like the next thing is like maybe I should. I've been looking into how to do an online course because I think the ideas are, somebody told me it's so simple that it's brilliant. And I was like, thank you. But it's actually, I think everybody knows this down in their soul. They
That's what
just
I think.
they just can't get through all the crap that they've learned. I think I put in the front of the Dina book, the quote from John Maynard Keynes is that it's not, I have it on my wall. The difficulty lies not so much in developing new ideas, but in escaping from the old ones.
Yes.
Yes.
It's
And
the unlearning
Mm-hmm.
process.
it's the
Mm-hmm.
unlearning. And right, isn't that what we do
Yep.
as young adults? We get all this stuff from our family and our friends and our teachers and everything. And then we get to be about 20 and we start, okay, what do I unlearn? And I have to throw it all out. And it takes us another 20 years to unlearn everything and then be like, okay, I think I'm ready to go. It's like we need to do better on that process.
Yeah.
We need
Heck,
to.
if you're lucky, I think I started my unlearning at 50. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still unlearning.
Yeah.
yep.
Well,
So
I was in my 40s and it was like, okay.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
and so that was another reason I wrote the book is like, I want to speed that process up. I think the one thing about this idea that I really love is that, religions are like, you can't do this and you can't do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. This one, the whole mechanism allows people to be people. Maximize your choice.
yeah.
Understand yourself enough to make the choice that you like. Just don't don't hurt anybody so they can maximize their choices too. That
Right.
is such an easy idea that we have skipped over, I think. And I
Mm-hmm.
want people to embrace that idea. And if we live that way, if we all live that way, which I really don't think people really will disagree with that idea, but if you live that way, I think the world would be a better place.
For
So
sure. It would be a
Amen.
better place.
okay. All right. Well,
Yep.
Amen.
I want to say thank you for having me. When you're out on, trying to figure out how to do a podcast, you kind of hope that somebody will say yes. And thank you for saying yes. It was really, really, I'm really grateful.
Thank you for writing this book. And thank you for going out and talking to people about it. And seriously,
Well,
this
you've
book,
inspired me to do the next step, the online course. So
oh, that would be
I'll
so
keep,
great.
okay, I'll keep it.
That would
Well,
be so
I'll keep
great. And
on.
if people listening know professors, tell them to teach this book.
Yes, yes. I would love that. So, okay. Thank you
Thank you
so
so
Thank
much.
you.
much, Anne.
Thank you,
All
Anne.
right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Do you want to recap?
I do. This book, so good. So good. I love the connection between, okay, this is how this works in nature. This is how this works in societies. This is what we're getting wrong, and we need to make these changes, or else we're just not going to exist anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But what I really thought was, I mean, everything in the book is impactful. I mean, I'm not going to say this is the most impactful, but I love that Anne also provides next steps. Like, okay, I've given you this information. Now what? Okay, here's how you can put this information into practice. Here's how you can think about this in your everyday life. And here's an example, like when she talks about social media. And there's one point that she made in the book about when she's talking about social media, and dang it, I'm probably not going to find the specific page, but she talks about how people are smart enough to create these companies that form up social media. It's ridiculous to think that they can't come up with ways to make sure that these organizations and these platforms and these new ideas don't harm people.
Oh, of course they can do that.
Exactly.
But it doesn't maximize profits if they do that.
Yeah, but here's the thing is, when
Facebook,
did it get to the point that maximizing profit means you don't give a flying fuck about?
and that's why I fundamentally disagree with you guys. I think that people know this. Maybe not the connection between, like, brilliant the way she wrote it out, the connection between the human body and society,
Mhm.
and how we should function versus how we don't. But I think everybody knows. I think everybody knows that having profit as your bottom line does not serve society. You can have multiple bottom lines in a business. Profit can be one of them. Taking care of
Mhm.
your people can be another. Maximizing sustainability can be a third. Taking care of the environment. All of those can be bottom lines in a company. But when you have multiple bottom lines, you're not maximizing profit. And any business school you go into in the United States is going to teach you how to maximize profit. And that is the
Yeah.
problem. It's not that people don't know this, it's that we are driven by this profit model, and we are being driven in our government right now by people who care about profit over people.
Well, then maybe what it is that we need to redefine
Of
what
course.
maximizing profit means. And
I
I
think we
do
need
think
to
that our
read
society is getting to a point like the whole, eat the rich idea. Like I think people are getting to the point where they're like, come on, man, this
this is
maximizing profit and doing good are not necessarily
multiple bottom lines. That's what
yeah,
I'm saying.
they're not necessarily adversarial. You can have both.
You can't. If you maximize profit, you're fighting against human interest. What a business needs is multiple bottom lines, profit being one of them, taking care of your people being another. You cannot maximize profit and be successful. I mean,
See,
you can, you,
I think I'm gonna disagree with that because there are companies that are successful. The head of the company is making money, the
but he's
employees are
not
taken care
maximized.
of.
If he's taking care of I said he, if they, because it could be a she, it could be
Yeah.
he. If they are taking care of their people and they're
Mhm.
paying wages, they're not maximizing the company's profit. They're not. That's not, those two things cannot be at the same time. That's why maximizing profit cannot be the goal. The goal is to have multiple bottom lines, one of them being making a profit, but
Mhm.
not maximizing it. You can't maximize profit and pay people well. You have to pay people shitty wages to maximize profit. That's why she says it clearly in the book.
Yeah, no, I know.
That's why maximizing profit cannot be the goal. It cannot be. We have
Yeah.
to have companies that have multiple bottom lines. Taking care of people has to be one of them. And taking care of our environment so that we survive as a species has to be one of them.
Yeah.
Maximizing profit is why we're in trouble, because drilling for oil, giving up our public lands to drill for oil is
And to cut
maximizing.
down trees.
Right. On page 135, she says
Okay.
self-interest.
Yeah.
As I mentioned, self-interest is the holy grail people often trot out to defend the behavior that is harmful to others. Here's the argument. Creatures in nature act to benefit their self-interest, so people should be able to act in the same way. It's natural. Animals kill each other, so we can kill each other too. Eat or be eaten, survival of the fittest, strongest wins, social Darwinism. This is what she's saying. She never
Yeah.
bought into these ideas, but our culture bought into these ideas
Big time.
because they believe Trump, he's the big winner because he has so much money. Elon Musk is the big winner. But meanwhile, they're sending people to space and killing our environment because that one trip, we
Yeah.
could feed people with that.
Yeah.
But we choose not to. We choose to let people starve. We choose to have war. Maximizing profit is the problem.
So then we need to
Have multiple, a business has to have multiple bottom lines that are important to them, profit being one of them, but it can't be everything, right?
Okay.
Profit is a bottom line, but at the same time, taking care of your people is just as important.
Yeah.
Doing no harm, her doing no harm is just as important. Taking care of the environment is just as important. A business can have multiple bottom lines, not just profit. But in the United States, probably around the world, currently we're running on this profit-based model. I'm very passionate about this.
No, and I get it, and I get it. And as I'm listening to you and I'm thinking about what I've said, I literally, and this is just who I am. I always fall back on my and kind of fall into my whole bleeding heart thing. And I'm like, yeah, but if da da da.
No,
So and which
your
you know,
bleeding
it is
heart,
what it
but
is.
but your bleeding heart is right. Your bleeding heart is the same thing that she's saying.
Right. And
This
so,
is
but
what we need. We need your
this
bleeding
is
heart,
what we
Raquel.
Thank you. Thank you. And but we need to we need to change the idea, and I don't know how we can do it, but we have got to figure out a way. There's got to be a way that profit and saving the planet and thus saving our existence can coexist. There's got to be a way.
Well, I think she kind of outlines an idea for that in the book when she
Yeah.
talks about the different way that government could run. If a
Right,
government
right.
is, I like her idea of schools being for profit as well, because then you're driving competition and then you're driving innovation in the school. But the government has to be the one that's on the oversight to make sure that all students in all schools are getting the same resources.
Right.
Right.
Well, but then that goes into what I was saying of empower companies
Yes.
to innovate, but bring people in who have that knowledge base and that creativity, but they've also got to have that education. So literally it's all of this just needs a huge reframing and rebranding and
Well, we need to vote people like Trump out of office
that is very
because,
true.
and we need to, and I like Anne Riley's talk about herself running. We need people running who can vision a different way to do it. Like,
Absolutely.
is her theory 100% right? I don't know. I have no way of knowing that.
But
she
it's a
did,
good way to think about stuff, though.
but she did draw some very good conclusions about how our society could function in the same way that a healthy body functions. A healthy body gets rid of the cell that doesn't work.
Yeah.
So let's just get rid of Trump. And all those other cells. And all those other cells that came with him.
Brilliant.
Right. It's been a really good discussion.
It really has. It really has. People, please read the book. I mean, if you think, we're having some discussion here, man, dude, read the book.
It's been a really good, yeah.
So good.
Yeah. Thanks, Raquel.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like this episode, please share it with a friend.
Or you could leave us a comment and a 5-star review, or email us at madnesscafepodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks, everybody.